The bridge of the USS Liberty hummed with quiet activity as Captain Jake Morrison reviewed the morning reports. Coffee steamed from his mug while he checked the routine patrol schedules. Nothing unusual had happened in the Sol system for months, which was exactly how Morrison liked it. His crew moved efficiently through their duties, the kind of smooth operation that came from years of working together. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Carter sat at her communications station, monitoring the usual chatter between Earth and the outer colonies. The morning shift had just begun when her console erupted with sounds she had never heard before. Strange clicking noises mixed with what sounded like musical tones came through the speakers. "Captain, I'm getting something weird on the long-range channels," Carter called out, her fingers dancing across her console as she tried to isolate the signal. "It's not coming from any of our ships or stations." Morrison set down his coffee and walked over to her station. "Can you clean it up?" "Working on it now, sir." Carter adjusted several dials and the signal became clearer. The sounds were definitely artificial, definitely intelligent, and definitely not human. "Sir, I think this might be what we've been waiting for." The captain felt his stomach tighten. Every human in space knew this day might come. They had prepared for it, trained for it, and built their entire defense strategy around it. But knowing something might happen, and having it actually happen were two very different things. "Red alert," Morrison ordered. "All hands to battle stations. Get me Admiral Chen on Earth immediately." The bridge lights dimmed to red as the crew scrambled to their combat positions. Commander Tony Phillips took his place at the tactical station, his hands already working to bring the ship's weapons online. Dr. Kevin Hayes hurried to his science station and began scanning the outer system for any signs of incoming ships. "Captain, I've got multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system," Hayes reported, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was seeing. 12 ships, sir. Big ones." On the main screen, the alien fleet materialized, like ghosts becoming solid. The ships were massive, easily 3 times the size of the largest human vessels. They moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with an almost mirror-like finish that reflected the distant sun. "They're beautiful," whispered Ensign Pete Jackson from the navigation station. Morrison had to agree. The alien ships looked like works of art rather than weapons of war. Elegant curves and sweeping lines gave them a grace that human ships, built for function over form, could never match. But something about their design made him want to smile rather than fear for his life. "Sir, I'm getting a transmission from the lead ship," Carter announced. "They're using our own communication frequency somehow." "Put it on screen." The view screen flickered and then showed the interior of an alien bridge. The being standing in the center wore what could only be described as a uniform, though it was covered in enough gold braid and decorative elements to stock a costume shop. A elaborate headdress that looked like it belonged in a museum sat on his head, complete with flowing feathers and jeweled ornaments. The alien began to speak, and the translation came through perfectly in English. "Greetings, primitive creatures of the third planet. I am Admiral Zektar of the Galactic Imperium, commander of the 7th Conquest Fleet. Your species has been selected for integration into our glorious empire." Morrison exchanged glances with his crew. Phillips was trying very hard not to smile. Carter had her hand over her mouth. Even Dr. Hayes was shaking his head in what looked like disbelief. The alien admiral continued his speech, apparently unaware of the effect he was having on his audience. "You will surrender all military vessels to Imperial forces immediately. You will provide complete population records and resource inventories. You will prepare your world for Imperial governance. Resistance is futile and will result in the complete destruction of your primitive civilization." "Sir," Phillips whispered, "are we really being threatened by someone wearing a hat made of feathers?" Morrison held up a hand for silence, though he was fighting his own urge to laugh. The alien speech was so perfectly theatrical, so exactly what every science fiction movie had prepared them to expect, that it felt more like a performance than a genuine threat. Furthermore, Admiral Zektar declared, raising his arms in what was probably meant to be an intimidating gesture, "Your species will provide tribute in the form of raw materials and manufactured goods. Your most intelligent individuals will be selected for service to the Empire. Your military leaders will be executed as an example to others who might consider defiance. The alien paused dramatically, clearly expecting some kind of response. The silence stretched on until Morrison realized that Zektar was actually waiting for him to say something. "Are you finished?" Morrison asked politely. "You dare to speak so casually to an admiral of the Imperium?" Zektar's voice rose in apparent outrage. "Do you not understand the situation? Your world is surrounded by the most powerful fleet in the galaxy." Dr. Hayes looked up from his science station with an expression of wonder. "Captain, I'm reading their weapon signatures. These ships are armed, but their technology is actually less advanced than ours in several key areas." "Less advanced?" Morrison asked. "Their energy weapons appear to be primarily designed for orbital bombardment against undefended targets," Hayes explained. "Great for destroying cities, but not very effective against moving targets in space. Their ship designs prioritize intimidation over maneuverability." Phillips checked his tactical display and started chuckling. "Sir, look at their formation. It's perfect for a parade, but terrible for actual combat. One good flanking maneuver and we could take out half their fleet." Carter turned from her station with barely contained laughter. "Captain, I think they're still waiting for us to surrender in terror." Morrison looked back at the screen where Admiral Zektar stood with his arms crossed, his elaborate costume making him look more like an opera singer than a military commander. The entire situation was so absurd that Morrison felt the last of his fear drain away, replaced by something he never expected to feel during humanity's first contact with aliens. He was trying very hard not to laugh. Captain Morrison cleared his throat and tried to compose his face into something resembling seriousness. The alien admiral was still waiting for a response, his feathered headdress bobbing slightly as he moved his head in what might have been impatience. "Admiral Zektar," Morrison began using his most professional voice, "I appreciate your generous offer to join your empire. However, I need to discuss this matter with my superiors on Earth before I can give you an answer." The alien's expression shifted to something that looked like confusion. "Discuss? There is nothing to discuss. You surrender immediately or face destruction." "I understand that," Morrison replied calmly. "But humans have this tradition of talking things over before making big decisions. Would you mind waiting while I contact Earth Command? It should only take a few minutes." Admiral Zektar looked genuinely puzzled. "You wish to delay your surrender?" "Just briefly," Morrison assured him. "We'll get back to you very soon." The transmission ended, and the bridge fell silent for exactly 3 seconds before Commander Phillips burst out laughing. "Did he just agree to wait while we call home to ask permission to surrender?" Lieutenant Commander Carter was wiping tears from her eyes. "Sir, in all the first contact scenarios we trained for, none of them covered what to do when the aliens are this polite about conquering us." Dr. Hayes looked up from his instruments with a grin. "Captain, I've been scanning their ships more carefully. Their weapons are mounted in fixed positions. They can't track fast-moving targets. Their entire fleet is designed to fight enemies that can't fight back." Morrison walked to the center of the bridge and activated the ship's internal communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. As you know, we have made contact with an alien fleet. They have demanded our surrender. I want everyone to know that while they look scary, they appear to be less of a threat than originally thought. Maintain battle stations, but stay calm. We're going to handle this situation." He switched to the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Liberty. Activate stealth protocols and move to defensive positions. Do not fire unless fired upon, but be ready for anything." Around the solar system, human ships that had been hiding behind asteroids and moons began to move. They had been waiting for this day for decades. Their captains trained on scenarios just like this one. The defense of Earth had been planned and replanned countless times. Commander Susan Blake acknowledged from her fighter squadron, her voice coming through clearly. "Liberty, this is Falcon Leader. My pilots are having trouble believing what they're seeing. These alien ships look impressive, but their design is all wrong for space combat." "What do you mean, Falcon Leader?" Morrison asked. "Sir, they're built like sailing ships from old Earth. Big, slow, meant to look intimidating. But in a real fight, our fighters could fly circles around them. Their weapons can't rotate fast enough to track us. Phillips pulled up tactical displays on his screen. Captain, look at this. I've been analyzing their formation. They're arranged for maximum visual impact, not tactical advantage. If we hit them from multiple directions, they'd have to break formation to respond effectively. Carter received another transmission from the alien fleet. Sir, Admiral Zektar is asking why we haven't surrendered yet. He sounds confused. Morrison smiled. Put him back on screen. The alien admiral appeared again, this time looking slightly less confident than before. Human Captain, you said you needed to consult with your superiors. Have you done so? I'm still waiting for a response from Earth Command. Morrison lied smoothly. But while we wait, I'm curious about something. How many species have you conquered, using this same approach? This same approach? Zektar repeated. You know, showing up with a big fleet demanding surrender, threatening destruction. Does it usually work this quickly? The admiral straightened his elaborate uniform. All species recognize the futility of resisting the Imperium. We have never encountered a civilization foolish enough to delay their inevitable surrender. Dr. Hayes leaned over to Morrison. Sir, I don't think they've ever actually fought a space battle before. Their entire military seems to be based on intimidation. Morrison nodded and turned back to the screen. Admiral, have you ever fought against an enemy that fought back? Fought back? The alien looked genuinely confused by the question. Why would they fight back? Fighting leads to destruction. Surrender leads to integration into the Empire. But what if they don't want to be integrated? Morrison asked. Want has nothing to do with it, Zektar replied. The Imperium decides what is best for all species. Phillips whispered. Sir, this is like being threatened by a bully who's never actually been in a real fight. Carter was monitoring communications from Earth and the outer colonies. Captain, I'm getting reports from across the system. Our hidden defense platforms are all online and ready. The Mars defense fleet is moving into position. The asteroid mining stations have activated their emergency protocols. Morrison realized that humanity was as ready as they would ever be. Generations of science fiction had taught them to expect exactly this scenario. Every human military officer had studied alien invasion stories. Every defense planner had considered how to fight technologically superior enemies. But now they were facing enemies who weren't technologically superior at all. Admiral Zektar, Morrison said, I've received word from Earth Command. We're going to have to decline your offer to join your empire. The alien's eyes widened. Decline. You cannot decline. No species has ever declined. Well, there's a first time for everything, Morrison replied cheerfully. We appreciate you stopping by, but we're quite happy managing our own affairs. This is impossible, Zektar sputtered. You will surrender immediately or face the consequences. Morrison looked around his bridge at his crew, all of whom were struggling not to laugh openly at the situation. Admiral, with all due respect, I don't think you understand who you're dealing with. You are primitives. You have barely achieved spaceflight. That's true, Morrison agreed. But we're primitives who have been thinking about how to fight galactic empires since before we left our home planet. We've been preparing for you for over a century. The alien admiral's confusion was evident. Preparing for us? Not you specifically, Morrison explained, but beings exactly like you. We've imagined this scenario thousands of times. We've written books about it, made movies about it, created games about it. Fighting alien invaders is practically our national hobby, Dr. Hayes added. Sir, our entertainment industry has been running war games against hypothetical alien empires for generations. We've considered every possible approach they might use. Zektar looked around his own bridge as if seeking support from his crew. This is not how first contact is supposed to proceed. Morrison smiled. Admiral, I think you're about to learn that humans don't do anything the way it's supposed to be done. Admiral Zektar's face turned a deeper shade of purple as he processed what the human captain had just told him. His elaborate feathered headdress trembled with what could only be rage. You dare refuse the Imperium? Zektar shouted into his communication device. No species has ever been so foolish. You will regret this decision for the brief time you have left to live. Captain Morrison watched the alien admiral's tantrum with the same expression he might use while watching a child throw a fit in a grocery store. Are you quite finished, Admiral? I am finished talking, Zektar declared. All ships prepare to fire. Destroy their pathetic fleet. The transmission ended abruptly. Morrison turned to his crew, who were all watching him expectantly. Well, that went about as expected, Morrison said calmly. Red alert. All hands prepare for combat. Phillips, what's their status? Commander Phillips checked his tactical display. Sir, they're moving into attack formation. It's taking them forever because those big ships turn like cargo haulers. Their weapons are powering up, but they're still in that parade formation. Lieutenant Commander Carter was busy coordinating with the fleet. Captain, all human ships report ready. The defense platforms are online. Mars fleet is in position. The asteroid miners have armed their industrial equipment. Dr. Hayes looked up from his science station with excitement. Sir, you need to see this. I've been analyzing their weapon signatures. Their main guns are designed for planetary bombardment. They're incredibly powerful, but they have almost no tracking ability. They can only hit stationary targets. And we're not planning to stay stationary, are we? Morrison asked with a smile. Definitely not, sir, Phillips replied. I've got movement orders ready for the entire fleet. We're going to dance around them like they're standing still. The first alien energy blast lit up the darkness of space like a miniature sun. It was aimed at Earth's moon, where the aliens apparently thought there might be military installations. The beam struck the lunar surface and carved out a crater visible from Earth with the naked eye. Well, that's impressive, Morrison admitted. Good thing nobody lives there. The second blast targeted what the aliens thought was a human space station. It turned out to be a decoy that the humans had built specifically for this purpose. The fake station exploded in a spectacular display of lights and debris. Sir, Carter reported. Colonel Danny Foster reports that the orbital defense platforms are ready to engage. He's asking permission to return fire. Permission granted, Morrison said. Tell the colonel to show our guests what human engineering can do. Around Earth's orbit, what had appeared to be space debris suddenly came alive. Camouflaged weapons platforms that had been drifting silently for years activated their systems and began targeting the alien fleet. The first human weapons fired, almost simultaneously, sending streams of projectiles toward the Imperial ships. The alien vessels, designed to intimidate rather than fight, had no-point defense systems. The human projectiles, simple kinetic rounds fired at tremendous speeds, punched through their elegant hulls like bullets through paper. Direct hits on 3 enemy vessels, Phillips reported with satisfaction. Their shields are pretty, but they're not designed to stop solid objects moving at high velocity. Admiral Zektar's voice came through the communication system again, but this time he sounded less confident. Impossible. How are you hitting our ships? Your technology is primitive. Morrison had Carter open a channel. Admiral, our technology might be primitive, but we've had a lot of practice using it. We've been fighting wars for thousands of years. The alien fleet tried to return fire, but their massive weapons couldn't track the small, fast-moving human ships. Commander Susan Blake led her fighter squadron in a series of attacks that exploited every weakness Dr. Hayes had identified. Liberty, this is Falcon Leader, Blake reported over the radio. These alien ships are sitting ducks. Their weapons can't rotate fast enough to track us. We're hitting them with everything we've got. Lieutenant Amy Peterson, flying one of the experimental fighters, demonstrated human reflexes that amazed even her own squadron mates. She flew her ship through gaps in the alien formation that seemed impossibly narrow, firing precisely aimed shots at critical systems. Peterson, what are you doing out there? Blake asked over the squadron channel. Just having fun, Commander, Peterson replied as she looped around an alien ship's superstructure. These things handle like old sailing ships. All we have to do is stay out of the way of their big guns. Dr. Hayes was monitoring the battle from his science station, analyzing every aspect of the alien technology. Captain, I'm seeing something interesting. Their ships are beautiful, but they're not built for war, they're built for show. What do you mean? Morrison asked. Look at their hull designs, Hayes explained, putting the data on the main screen. All those curves and decorative elements actually make them less efficient. They prioritize appearance over function. It's like they designed their fleet to look scary rather than to fight effectively. Chief Engineer Gary Collins reported from Engineering. Captain, I've been looking at their engine signatures. Their ships are powerful, but they're not maneuverable. They're built to travel in straight lines between star systems, not to fight in close quarters. The battle continued, but it was becoming clear that it wasn't much of a battle at all. The human ships danced around the alien fleet like wolves attacking a herd of elephants. Every time the aliens tried to bring their massive weapons to bear, the humans were already somewhere else. Commander Phillips coordinated the human fleet movements with the efficiency of someone who had trained for this exact scenario his entire career. All ships, execute Maneuver 7, he ordered. Let's show them what happens when you corner a species that's been practicing warfare since before they discovered fire. The human ships split into 3 groups, attacking the alien fleet from different directions simultaneously. The aliens, locked into their rigid formation, couldn't respond to multiple threats at once. Admiral Zektar's communications were becoming increasingly frantic. This is not possible. You are primitives. You should not be able to resist the Imperium. Morrison decided to answer. Admiral, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're not primitives. We're humans. And humans have been preparing for this. Fight longer than your species has been traveling between stars. Preparing? How could you prepare for the Imperium? We are the greatest military force in the galaxy. Dr. Hayes laughed as he monitored the alien communications. Sir, I don't think they understand. They've never encountered a species that treats warfare as entertainment. Morrison nodded. Admiral Zektar, let me explain something to you. For the past century, humans have been imagining scenarios exactly like this one. We've written stories about fighting galactic empires. We've made movies about alien invasions. We've created games where we battle fleets just like yours. We've been practicing for this fight since before we left our home planet. The alien admiral's response was barely coherent. That is impossible. No species would prepare for war they had never fought. Most species wouldn't, Morrison agreed. But humans aren't most species. We prepare for wars we hope we'll never have to fight. And when someone shows up at our door with exactly the threat we've been expecting, well, we know exactly what to do about it. The human fleet pressed their advantage, systematically dismantling the alien formation with tactics that would have been familiar to any student of military history. The Imperium's ships, designed to cow defenseless civilizations, found themselves completely outmatched by an enemy that had been studying their weaknesses for generations. The battle had been raging for 2 hours, and Admiral Zektar was beginning to understand that something had gone terribly wrong with his conquest plans. 3 of his ships were severely damaged, their beautiful hulls scarred by human weapons. His remaining vessels were struggling to maintain formation, while human fighters swarmed around them like angry insects. Report, Zektar demanded from his bridge crew. Admiral, the humans are using tactics we have never encountered, his tactical officer replied nervously. They attack from multiple directions simultaneously. Their ships work together in ways our computers cannot predict. Captain Morrison watched the battle unfold from the Liberty's bridge with something approaching professional admiration. The human fleet was performing exactly as it had been designed to do, each ship playing its part in a complex dance of destruction that had been choreographed by decades of military planning. Sir, Commander Phillips reported, the aliens are trying to regroup, but they're having trouble adapting to our tactics. Every time they adjust to counter one of our moves, we switch to something completely different. Chief Engineer Gary Collins had been busy in the engine room, making modifications that would have horrified safety inspectors under normal circumstances. Captain, I've managed to boost our weapon output by 30%. It's not exactly regulation, but it works. How did you manage that, Gary? Morrison asked. Well, sir, I bypassed about half the safety systems and rerouted power from life support, Collins explained cheerfully. We can breathe recycled air for a few hours if it means we can hit harder. Dr. Hayes looked up from his science station with excitement. Captain, I've been analyzing the alien ship designs more carefully. I think I understand why they look so strange. These aren't really warships at all. What do you mean? Morrison asked. They're ceremonial vessels, Hayes explained, built to look impressive during parades and intimidation displays. The weapons are real, but they're secondary to the ship's main purpose, which is to make other species surrender without fighting. Lieutenant Commander Carter was monitoring communications across the human fleet. Sir, Commander Blake reports that her fighters have identified critical weak points in the alien ship designs. She's requesting permission to target their command centers. Permission granted, Morrison replied. Tell Blake to be surgical about it. I want to disable them, not necessarily destroy them. Commander Susan Blake acknowledged the order and began coordinating her squadron's attacks with precision that would have impressed any military academy instructor. Her pilots had studied the alien ships carefully and identified exactly where to strike for maximum effect. Lieutenant Amy Peterson led the attack on the alien flagship, her experimental fighter dancing through the enemy's defensive fire like it wasn't even there. Falcon Leader, I'm seeing something interesting about their shields. They're designed to stop energy weapons, but they don't do much against solid projectiles. Good catch, Peterson, Blake replied. All fighters switch to kinetic rounds and target their shield generators. The human fighters swarmed the alien flagship, their weapons pecking away at critical systems with the persistence of woodpeckers attacking a tree. Each hit was small, but together they began to have a serious effect on the massive vessel's ability to function. Admiral Zektar felt his ship shudder under the human attacks. This is impossible. How can such small craft damage a ship of this size? His engineering officer looked up from his console with confusion. Admiral, the humans are targeting specific systems. They know exactly where to hit us for maximum damage. It is as if they have fought ships like ours before. That cannot be, Zektar insisted. We are the first representatives of the Imperium they have encountered. Dr. Hayes was listening to the alien communications with growing understanding. Captain, I think I know what's happening. The aliens keep saying this is impossible because they've never fought anyone who fought back effectively. Their entire military doctrine is based on overwhelming force against helpless targets. Morrison nodded. So when they encounter an enemy that's actually prepared for war, they don't know how to adapt. Exactly, sir. They're like a boxer who's only ever fought training dummies suddenly facing a real opponent. Commander Phillips coordinated another wave of attacks, sending human ships in patterns that confused the alien targeting systems. Sir, the enemy fleet is starting to break apart. Some of their ships are trying to retreat, but they're too slow to escape our fighters. Chief Engineer Collins reported from engineering with barely contained glee. Captain, I've been watching their engine emissions. I think I can overload their power systems if we hit them with the right frequency of electromagnetic pulses. Do it, Morrison ordered. Collins began broadcasting a series of precisely timed energy bursts toward the alien fleet. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Several alien ships began experiencing power fluctuations that made their weapon systems unreliable. How did you know that would work? Dr. Hayes asked. I've been reading science fiction novels since I was 12. Collins replied with a grin. This is exactly the kind of trick humans always use against aliens in the stories. I figured it was worth a try. Admiral Zektar was becoming desperate. His fleet was being systematically dismantled by an enemy he had expected to surrender without a fight. All ships concentrate fire on the human flagship, destroy their command vessel. The remaining alien ships turned their massive weapons toward the Liberty, but Captain Morrison had been expecting this move. All ahead full, he ordered. Take us into the asteroid field. The Liberty accelerated toward a nearby cluster of space rocks with the alien fleet following. But the human ship was smaller and more maneuverable, able to weave between asteroids that the massive alien vessels couldn't avoid. Sir, they're having trouble following us through the asteroid field, Phillips reported. Their ships are too big to navigate safely between the rocks. Morrison smiled. That's the plan. Carter, open a channel to Admiral Zektar. The alien admiral appeared on the screen, his elaborate uniform now disheveled, and his feathered headdress. SQ. Human Captain, your resistance ends now. Surrender or be destroyed. Admiral, Morrison said calmly, I think it's time for you to understand something about humans. We don't just prepare for war by building weapons. We prepare by studying every possible scenario, thinking through every possible problem, and practicing until we can solve them in our sleep. Your preparation means nothing against the might of the Imperium, Dr. Hayes interrupted. Actually, sir, it means everything. We've been analyzing their fleet capabilities throughout this battle. Their ships are powerful, but they're designed for a specific type of warfare that doesn't work against prepared enemies. Morrison continued. Admiral, your empire has been conquering species that had never fought a space battle before. You've been bullying civilizations that didn't know how to fight back. But humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've gotten very good at it. Commander Blake's voice came over the radio. Liberty, this is Falcon Leader. We've disabled the weapon systems on 6 enemy vessels. They're effectively out of the fight. Admiral Zektar, Morrison said, I'm going to make you an offer. You can continue this battle and lose more ships, or you can accept that maybe your empire isn't as invincible as you thought. The alien admiral looked around his damaged bridge, his crew working frantically to repair systems that the humans had systematically destroyed. For the first time since arriving in the Sol system, Zektar was beginning to realize that he might have made a serious mistake. This changes nothing, he said, but his voice lacked the confidence it had carried earlier. The Imperium has thousands of ships. More will come. Morrison nodded. Maybe they will. But now you know that humans fight back, and we're very good at it. Captain Morrison watched Admiral Zektar's face on the main screen and saw something he hadn't expected to see. The alien commander looked tired, confused, and for the first time, genuinely concerned about the outcome of this battle. Admiral, Morrison said in a calm voice, I'm calling for a temporary ceasefire. Zektar's eyes widened. A ceasefire? But you are winning. Why would you stop fighting when victory is within your grasp? Morrison smiled. Because I'm curious about something. Your empire has conquered hundreds of worlds, right? Thousands, Zektar corrected automatically. And how many of those conquests involved actual space battles like this one? The alien admiral was quiet for a long moment. His tactical officer whispered something to him, and Zektar's expression became even more troubled. Answer the question, Admiral, Morrison pressed gently. None, Zektar admitted quietly. No species has ever resisted our initial demands. Dr. Hayes looked up from his science station with understanding. Captain, I think I see what's happening here. The Imperium's entire military strategy is based on psychological warfare, not actual combat. Commander Phillips nodded. They show up with big scary ships, make threatening demands, and everyone surrenders before any fighting starts. That's why their ships are built for show instead of combat, Chief Engineer Collins added. They've never needed to actually fight anyone. Lieutenant, Commander Carter was monitoring communications from across the human fleet. Sir, all our ships are reporting the same thing. The alien vessels are impressive looking, but they're not designed for real warfare. Morrison turned back to the screen where Admiral Zektar was waiting. Admiral, can I ask you something else? In all your conquests, have you ever encountered a species that had prepared for your arrival? Prepared? How could they prepare? The Imperium is secret until we reveal ourselves. But what if a species had spent generations thinking about the possibility of alien invasion? What if they had planned and trained for exactly this scenario? Zektar looked genuinely puzzled. Why would any species do such a thing? Morrison laughed. Because it's fun to think about. Humans have been imagining alien invasions for over a century. We've written thousands of stories about fighting galactic empires. We've made movies about space battles. We've created games where we defend Earth from alien fleets. You prepared for war as entertainment? Zektar asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Among other things, yes, Morrison replied. We've been practicing for this fight since before we achieved spaceflight. Every human military officer has studied alien invasion scenarios. Every defense planner has considered how to fight technologically superior enemies. Dr. Hayes added, Admiral, your ships and tactics are almost exactly what our science fiction writers predicted. You're following patterns that humans have been analyzing for decades. Commander Susan Blake's voice came over the radio. "Liberty, this is Falcon Leader. Admiral, sir, I have to say, your ships are beautiful, but they fight like parade floats. No offense intended." Morrison saw something change in Admiral Zektar's expression. The alien was beginning to understand that he hadn't just encountered unexpected resistance. He had run into a species that had been specifically preparing for enemies exactly like the Imperium. "Captain Morrison," Zektar said slowly, "are you telling me that your entire species has been training to fight the Imperium since before you knew we existed?" "Not just the Imperium," Morrison corrected. "Any galactic empire that might show up and try to conquer us. We've considered dozens of possible scenarios. Your approach is actually one of the more common ones in our fiction." Chief Engineer Collins chimed in over the intercom. "Sir, we've got tactical manuals that are centuries old that describe exactly how to fight this kind of enemy. The Admiral's fleet is like a textbook example of what not to do in space combat." Admiral Zektar looked around his damaged bridge. Several of his ships were disabled, his crew was demoralized, and his enemy was offering to explain why they had lost so badly. "What do you want from us?" Zektar asked. Morrison considered the question carefully. "Honestly, we want to understand you. Your empire has obviously been successful for a long time. You must be doing something right if you've conquered thousands of worlds." "We bring order to chaos," Zektar replied automatically. "We provide structure and governance to primitive civilizations." "But do you provide anything else?" Dr. Hayes asked. "Technology, medicine, cultural exchange?" "The Imperium provides everything necessary for civilized existence." Commander Phillips looked skeptical. "But what if a civilization doesn't want to be civilized according to your standards? What if they prefer their own way of life?" "Their preferences are irrelevant," Zektar said. But he sounded less certain than before. Morrison leaned forward. "Admiral, can I make a suggestion? Instead of trying to conquer us, why don't we try working together?" "Working together?" Zektar repeated the words like they were in a foreign language. "Your empire obviously has resources and technology. Humans have military expertise and experience dealing with complex problems. Maybe we could help each other." Dr. Hayes was already thinking ahead. "Captain, if the Imperium has been conquering worlds for centuries, they must have encountered genuine threats along the way. Pirates, hostile aliens, natural disasters. We could help them deal with those problems." "And in return?" Zektar asked. "Trade," Morrison replied simply. "Cultural exchange. Maybe some of that technology you mentioned. We're curious about the galaxy beyond our solar system." Commander Blake's voice came over the radio again. "Captain, I hate to interrupt, but we're getting some interesting readings from the edge of the system. Looks like more ships dropping out of hyperspace." Everyone on both bridges turned to look at their long-range sensors. Dr. Hayes was the first to analyze the new contacts. "Sir, these aren't Imperium ships. Different design, different technology signature, and they're heading straight for the Imperium fleet." Admiral Zektar's face went pale. "Kethran raiders. They must have followed our trail from the Sigma sector." "Raiders?" Morrison asked. "Space pirates," Zektar explained. "They attack Imperium fleets to steal our technology. They are actually dangerous, unlike the civilizations we usually encounter." Morrison looked at his crew, then back at Zektar. "Admiral, it sounds like you have a real enemy approaching. One that won't be intimidated by pretty ships and fancy uniforms." "The Kethran fight to kill," Zektar said grimly. "They do not negotiate. They do not accept surrender." Commander Phillips was already analyzing the approaching fleet. "Captain, the raiders outnumber the Imperium ships 2-1, and their vessels look like they're actually built for combat." Morrison made a decision that would have surprised his crew an hour earlier. "Admiral Zektar, would you like some help dealing with these raiders?" The alien admiral stared at him in amazement. "You would fight alongside us? After we tried to conquer you?" "You tried," Morrison said with a smile. "But now you have a real problem, and we might be able to help you solve it. Besides, defending the system is what we do best." Dr. Hayes was studying the raider ships as they approached. Captain, these look like the kind of enemies our military actually trained to fight. Fast, aggressive, designed for real combat. Perfect, Morrison replied. Admiral Zektar, consider this a demonstration of what humans can do when we're on your side instead of against you. The Imperium Admiral looked at his damaged fleet, then at the approaching raiders, then back at Captain Morrison. For the first time since arriving in the Sol system, Admiral Zektar smiled. Captain Morrison, I believe we have much to learn from each other. As the human and Imperium fleets began coordinating their defenses against the approaching raiders, Morrison reflected that sometimes the best way to end a war was to find a bigger fight that required former enemies to become allies. The galaxy, it seemed, was about to get a lot more interesting.